This is Writing Daily. Welcome to another episode of doing stuff and talking about stuff that is the writer's life. And it was interesting. The other day I did an episode about putting pictures in books and got like an avalanche of response, both on, well, not so much online, but offline. It was impressive that I may not be having enough pictures across the board. By the way, if my name is Devin Galladay, I am the editor-in-chief of In the Know Traveler and the author of the forthcoming memoir, 10,000 Miles with My Dead Father's Ashes. As always, if you like what I am doing and you are interested in writing better, please consider hitting the like button over here, or leave a comment, or hit the wow button. Any of those kinds of things are all sort of like joyful on my part, so thank you so much. And so, yeah, we're going to be talking about audiobooks in a minute, but first I just wanted to kind of comment on the amount of people who love and want photos. By the way, welcome, Jill, thank you for being here. Robert, great to have you. And so, the idea of not putting photos in literary works, I think, is largely common. I think, again, it kind of goes back to whether or not you can add photos that specifically address what the story is about. I can't necessarily do that. Now, that said, I think my publisher is still going to be talking about that in the future, and we may go back and forth with that a little bit more in the future. I'm not sure. I'm still leaning towards not having photos. I don't think it's necessary, and I don't necessarily think it'll enhance the story. By the way, David, Matt, Yvonne, good to see you here. It makes my day bright. So let's move on to, actually, there's one more thing I wanted to say. For my peeps who are living in Long Beach, or if you're in the Long Beach area, I'm going to be doing my first Long Beach launch party in September 22nd at 3 p.m. at Gadsby Books. I haven't spoken to them directly, but my publisher has let me know, which is kind of an exciting moment for me. So I hope if you are in the neighborhood that you'll stop by. I think we're probably going to have a lot of fun and probably some cake and that kind of thing too. But on to today's subject, which is the audiobook. And so it's highly likely, and this is after my conversation with my publisher, that we're likely going to have an audiobook edition of 10,000 Miles, which is a really exciting thing. It's something that I want. To be quite honest with you, I want as many forms as possible, so as many human beings can kind of have this story as possible. Right? And that's the goal of a writer. The goal of a writer is I want you to hear the story. I want you to hear my tale and learn from my mistakes and all those kinds of good things. So that said, as we approach, one of the things that I had always had in the back of my mind is that I would somehow read the actual final narration, and obviously, I would kill it. I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but that was sort of in the back of my head, that yes, of course, who else could possibly read my story other than me as the writer? And so, when we talked about this with my publisher, there's pluses and minuses to both of it. One is whether or not I would do sort of a remarkable job. I think when you get in to start learning about what an audiobook is, I think there are professional people who do audiobooks for a living. They don't necessarily have to write, but they're great orators, and they probably just can read it and do it quickly and do it wonderfully. Or they're professional actors, and they're capable of doing dramatic readings and having it come across as a unique and wonderful tale. And then there's me, who I am, a little bit dyslexic, and I'm a little bit inarticulate, and the likelihood of me reading my own writing without saying 25 times is probably a downside. And I imagine that my friends are probably going to say, no, you've got to read your own work. And by the way, if it's possible, I'm totally going to do it. But, if you are a writer and you're, kind of challenged with the same kind of decision, or even if that's an option, that perhaps just getting a professional to read it has some upsides. Matter of fact, what my publisher was talking about that is, I think, really useful information is that people who do audiobooks and do it well actually have a following. So it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's necessarily buying my book per se. What they're doing is there are people who are just simply fans, like just as you may have a favorite author or a band or something like that. There's also people who actually have who are fans of book readers, and so they may not be reading. May not just be purely reading my book because they want to read it. They may be listening to sort of like an audio book pro. And so the question becomes, do you read it anyway, or do you have an audiobook pro read it? In my circumstance, it's probably highly likely that, I may be in the running, but whoever's going to decide, like my publisher isn't an audiobook person per se. In other words, they're not going to do it. They're going to sort of like do the sub rights to some person, and we take money from that, which is great. But ultimately they're going to decide of how it's going to look. Maybe they'll discuss it with me, maybe they won't. They may hire sort of like the person they feel is going to do the best job and in the shortest amount of time, because I'm assuming studio time and all that's going to cost, manpower and time and money. So I guess really what I'm saying is that there is two sides to the coin. The obvious coin for me is, yes, of course I want to read my story because I'm a control freak and I want it to be done my way. And how could I not read my own story? And then, of course, the other side of it is that if I get a professional, it may be done that much better. Those people who read it may actually have their own fans who will learn about my story and be inspired by my story, not because it's my story, but because they are loyal to the person who's going to be doing the book reading performance for the audiobook. So I guess there's a handful of things to consider here. What's your story? And whether or not, would you want to read your own story? Would it be okay for somebody else to read it for you? By the way, if you like what I'm doing, please consider leaving a comment or hitting the like button as always. And by the way, Caitlin, Peter, and Allison, thank you so much for stopping by. Grateful as always. And so, by the way, it's the 4th of July. So I want to wish everybody and certainly thank our troops for keeping our country safe and from harm. I'm actually wearing my Captain America t-shirt. Actually, I was just sweating in it really more than anything else. But I want to thank our troops for giving us freedoms and happiness and for making this a wonderful country that I get to be thankfully a part of and allow to kind of come and go at my leisure. It's like, really, I've never had it this good. So I am terrifically and tremendously grateful by the support of other people. So having that all said, I wish you a safe and wonderful holiday. Don't get too close to the explosives because there's going to be a lot of them out there. And until next time, keep writing. Write about today. Today's, one of those fantastic launch pads for good things and not so good things in your own writer's life. And so I wish you a peaceful day. And as always, I'll be back again tomorrow with more Writing Daily. And thanks so much for joining us. Take care.